Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of book club. I actually forgot that this was. Ooh, that's loud. I do apologize. I actually forgot that that's up there. I am participating in the St. Jude charity event this year. It's called. My campaign is Roses for the Little Warriors. So if you guys catch me on a live stream, you can definitely get the link to donate if you so desire. But this week, well, ASMR. We are in chapter 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring, which was called... Oh, I flipped back too far. The Shadow of the Past. I freaking loved this chapter, so I'm very excited to discuss it. We have everybody in the VC already. I just had to get things set up and posted and all that jazz. So let's get in there with the group. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys are catching this on YouTube, which makes complete sense because I'm not recording these on Twitch anymore. Duh. But thank you so much for finding my channel. If you're not already subscribed, please drop a subscribe button, click English. And I post these Tuesday morning afterwards, and I also do some playthroughs, and I put a lot of clips out there. So if you like my content, stick around. There's more of it, or I'll see you in a live stream, and would love to hear from you if you come by my stream saying you came over from YouTube. So let's get into the voice chat, shall we? Let's do this thing. Hello.
Hello. Why, hello, Astrid.
Hello. I had to do my introduction. I had to posty all my thingies saying that we were doing this because, you know, for the content. Anyways, okay. So, what I was saying before I started recording is that I really, and by really, I mean really enjoyed these well, it's only one chapter. This chapter, singular, this chapter. I really enjoyed it because overarching blanket statement is that I felt like the movies captured really crucial parts, but then it was also cool to see that there were things that they put in later, like the whole thing with what's his name, Deagle, or however you pronounce it, and Smeagol. Like they put that in the Return of the King, which was Andy Serkis's idea, because he was like, I'd like to go back. I think in the special features he even talks about it. He's like, I really wanted to go back and kind of what would that Smeagol pre-ring look like and stuff in a physical live action sense. And so I just freaking loved this chapter. And I was telling Mork and others that were in here first, is that I was like, I felt like, as we've learned through The Hobbit and just in these 1.5 chapters, if you consider the prologue as a half a chapter, is that yes, Tolkien, as we know, very descriptive writer, very detailed, especially when world building, but I was not overly overwhelmed by this like I was in The Hobbit, where there was that, I forget what it was, but it was we even talked about it in our discussion, where it was holy smokes, Tolkien, okay, we got it. Oh, it was the when they were at what's his name's house, and they were sending him in 2 at a time, and you're just okay, I get it, we're not overwhelming the man, but holy smokes. But it's this, I felt was very descriptive, but not in a bad way. I felt like it was a good level of description and was needed. So that is my blanket statement. Let's get into it. Okay. So as we know, this first couple bits of this chapter is obviously just talking about time after Bilbo has left, and many years pass because Frodo gets up into either close to his 50s or in his 50s. The language, because he's had his 50th birthday, or it's drawing near. So it's that's what, 30, is it 31 or 33 that's coming of age? 33? 31? When was...
It was 33 because it's 33 and 111 to make the gross, which is the 144 for the both of them together.
Ah, that's right. Okay, so 33. So it's been 17, give or take a few months, years since Bilbo left. And so you know, he recounts like, oh, every year he does the birthday, and you know, it's yeah, I find it funny how like, you know, the people of the Shire blame Gandalf for like things, and then like I also felt that, well, let me back up. I found it interesting that we first meet in a way Merry and Pippin in this like first little bit, as well as like it's mentioned throughout this chapter that like Merry and Pippin like follow Frodo around like while he just kind of like wanders the Shire, which we don't really get in the movies. We kind of just get that Merry and Pippin are friends with him, and obviously then decide, you know, when they, you know, mushrooms and all that stuff in the movies, then Merry and Pippin are kind of roped into everything, which we haven't gotten to in this chapter yet, like at all. Like that doesn't happen in this chapter. But I liked that like Merry and Pippin, you know, it's described that's like, oh no, these are like his closest friends. And it just felt in the movies more of like, oh yeah, they're friends kind of thing, at least to me. And then I also really liked that when they describe how elves are seen traveling west and like on their western border, and there's also like dwarves and stuff too that come by and everything. I loved that because the way that it's like kind of portrayed in the movies and other times, it feels really much, that's terrible English. It feels like hobbits and the Shire are like very removed from the world. At least that's, you know, they're just kind of in their own world, you know. So they're the Shire folk. They're not bothered by the world of men and blah 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 blah. But it's like no, like they know that like, you know, Frodo wants to know what's going on in the outside world. It's like we have mention of the Grey Havens, you know, we have mention of you know, like let's see, where is it? Let's see.
Yeah, it's really the main east-west road, it says, right? Kind of
Yeah.
goes through the Shire. So there's a, you know, they would routinely get folks if they were going that way, which, yeah, you don't get that feel at all from the movie.
Yeah, I was kind of like shocked, sounds really dramatic, but I was kind of shocked by that. Reading that, I was like, oh, so like hobbits do know of the other races of Middle Earth, like even in just like a broad sense, is like they're not so sheltered, which was very interesting. And it was also cool to see that like they had heard about, you know, the evil power in Mirkwood and the White Council, and like, you know, and like I kind of liked this little reference here. For me, it's on page 43. And they mentioned trolls and like the trolls and the orcs and stuff like that. And I found that interesting because I was like, oh, well, we had reference to these creatures in The Hobbit, and it's like, oh, they've adapted, they've gotten more advanced. Is kind of a, I don't know if that's the best word, but like they've advanced, they've developed, they've adapted, etc. And it's like, oh, like these are gonna be like, you know, fearsome enemies now. And then, you know, we go into, you know, we're at the Green Dragon, so we're in this like theme of merriment, you know, and very like, we're cheery, we're hobbits, we have our flagon of ale, you know, or our pint or whatever, you know, whatever size. And I kind of liked this little like banter that goes on where, you know, it's, they kind of touch on it in the movie, you know, where there's like, you know, they're poking fun at Frodo a little bit of like, like, you know, he's like, cheers, gaffer, you know, and everything. And he's like, you stick or keep your nose out of trouble and trouble won't find you, or whatever he says in the movie. And Frodo like cheers to him for it and everything. And, you know, it's like, but I can hear fireside tales and children's stories at home if I want to. You know, and so they're like saying, oh, everything that we're hearing, like, ugh, who cares? Like, they're just children's stories, they're just tall tales. You know, not a big deal. And then even when, was it Sam says that Hal has seen stuff and everything, they're like, no, like, no.
Oh yeah, seeing the ints. I don't know if I caught before that they were really talking about the ints they were seeing, which
yeah,
doesn't come up again for a while.
yeah, I picked up on that as well, Mark, of like, we're already talking about Ents. Like, those don't come up until the Two Towers in the movies. Like, whoa, kind of thing. And let's see, then we're talking more of, the elves going to the Grey Havens. Let's see. There was a line, might have been later on. Never mind. There was one line in here that I was like, ooh, remember that? I didn't have my sticky notes. Oh yeah, like this part where they were like, Leastways old Bilbo was cracked and Frodo's cracking. And it was like, oh boy. They're thinking that Frodo's going down the same path. And then we get caught up on like, Gandalf. Gandalf comes back, which was, I thought that this whole accounting, we'll go through it a bit more, but like this whole accounting of Gandalf telling a little bit more of the backstory of the ring. Wow. Like I think it paints a much clearer picture of like the character of the ring, because you kind of get a grasp of that in the movie a little bit, like how they're, it's in this scene in the movie, Gandalf saying, or maybe it wasn't, no, it's Galadriel in the introduction, she's like, but the ring betrayed Isildur and stuff like that. So you got a little snippet of the idea that the ring is actually like a character, it's an entity. But like in the book, it's, he goes into detail of like the ring saw the opportunity to leave with Bilbo and leave Gollum because it noticed that like Gollum was never going to leave the mountains, so the only way for it to escape was to go with Bilbo and to be found when Bilbo found it. And then like, and we'll get to there, but I was just like, wow, like yes, it's Sauron through the ring, but like the ring is its own like character. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Like, where's the IMDb on the ring? So it's like Gandalf comes back. Yeah, or he comes back and then he's talking about how he would come and go, and then it was 9 years. There was like a gap of 9 years, and then Gandalf came back, and it's like, okay, so Gandalf actually stayed this time. Let's see. I'm like skimming.
And I just thought it was interesting how much of the dialogue from this part ends up coming in. They apparently in the movie they really wanted him to hit the road quickly, but then they found the part in the Mines of Moria where so much of the stuff that kind of comes in the dialogue here was placed in under the Moria scene when they first kind of introduced Gollum coming up. Which I'm glad that they did find a way to add it into the movie, even if they didn't put it in this scene.
No, I agree with you. And I was reading through several of these things. I was like, when in the movie it was like Gandalf appeared, where's the, like, you have the ring, and then it was like immediately rush out the door, and it was like, oh gosh, kind of thing. Whereas, we spent 20 pages, I was about to say 20 chapters, 20 pages describing the ring's backstory and where it's been and who had it and the history of all the rings and origins of the ring wraiths and Gollum's back. It's like, wow, like, it definitely feels more like Gandalf and Frodo were like sitting by the fire for a minute. Like they were there and they had a cup of tea, a pipe. And I think also an interesting way that shows the passage of time as well is Sam cutting the grass. Because that's mentioned very early on that like they can hear Sam cutting the hedges or cutting the grass outside. Whereas I get the sense in the movie where it almost feels like Sam just kind of appears in the bush. And yes, he says that he was like trimming the hedges or whatever, but like they don't really make a reference to it unless there's some kind of sound effect in the background that I've never picked up on. There isn't as much of a sense of time progression, whereas like with Sam cutting the grass, and then we keep hearing references of like we can still hear Sam cutting the grass outside, and then at the very end you don't hear Sam cutting the grass, and that's when the whole eavesdropping and how much did you hear and blah blah blah. Let's see. Again, scanning here. Oh, I did also like this little like paragraph. For me, it's on page 46. He was like, a mortal Frodo who keeps one of the great rings does not die, but he does not grow or obtain more life. He merely continues until at last every minute is a weariness, and if he often uses the ring to make himself invisible, he fades. He becomes in the end invisible permanently and walks in the twilight under the eye of the dark power that rules the rings. Yes, sooner or later, if he is strong or well-meaning to begin with, but neither strength nor good purpose will last, sooner or later the dark power will devour him. I think that was my paragraph that I really loved. That I was just like, wow, that's a really profound idea as well, of like this concept of if he is strong or well-meaning to begin with, but neither strength nor good purpose will last, sooner or later the dark power will devour him. It was like, wow, that's like really impactful to think that even the strongest among the world could not endure forever. And it was like, wow, what an idea of like, in its own way, I think that shows how powerful the ring is, or one of the, you know, the great rings, is that it can break even and devour even the strongest. Like that's just let's see. And then to kind of tie into the whole thing of like the ring being its own character as well, the concept of the ring changing weight and changing size, and that's why Frodo puts the ring on a chain versus just like, you know, putting it in his pocket or whatever. Because it even mentions that like he has it in his pocket, but the chain is like linked into his, I'm assuming like a belt loop or something, like it's attached to him. And we get into like obviously how Bilbo, air quote, literally it's air quoted, won the ring. I'm still scanning for more stuff, so feel free, anybody, to jump in on things. Let's see.
I do like how Gandalf's a little ornery. He's like, when did you know all this? And he's like, no, and I've known a lot of stuff over my years. About this in particular, though.
Yeah. Yep, there's definitely a lot of snark, which I like. And he never truly answers either, because that kind of question or line of inquiry comes up several times in this chapter, where it's like, well, when did you find this out? how did you know this? Like, he mentions it later too about like the markings on the ring, is that it's like, well, how did you know they were going to be there? He's like, well, I had my suspicions, but this was like the last telling thing, but I stopped guessing about it. Or like, and it was the Gollum stuff too, like when he's talking about finding Gollum, he's like, well, I kind of knew some of this, and then Gollum filled in some of the blanks, and then I stopped really guessing, and I kind of just figured it was like, oh my goodness gracious. Like, straight answer, old man.
Yeah.
Straight
Yeah.
answer.
But I'm going to have to try and remember that quote. Known, said Gandalf. I have known much that only the wise know, Frodo. But if you mean known about this ring.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a couple of good quotes in here I'm going to have to try and remember.
Oh yeah, for sure. So then, so when they're saying that this might be a Tim question, if he's able to unmute at this moment, he might know. But when Gandalf says the letters are Elvish of an ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here, blah, 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 blah. So is he saying that more like the tongue of Mordor, like the language, is derived from Elvish, or how is it Elvish but also language of Mordor? Like how is it both? Hoping Tim can unmute because he probably knows. Yeah. Awkward silence.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's like how the characters that that we use to write our alphabet can write Spanish or English, right, or multiple other languages. I mean, I think it might be that.
It might come from the fact that the original orcs were actually corrupted elves, so it would make sense that their language would be a corrupted form of Elvish.
That's an interesting thought. Which is also an interest, like, kind of ties into what you were saying too, Mark, of like same physical letters, but maybe ordered a different way or spelled a different way. Like maybe the symbols of the letters were the same, but they're compiled differently, maybe, which would be the same thing.
So they are in the Black Speech of Mordor, which is a different language and has different lettering. It's similar, but there's like 4 or 5 different Elven languages.
Oh, got it.
And it is its own variety.
I see. That makes sense. I did also like, similar to your point, Mark, of like bringing things in and tying things in at various points, how like the one ring to bring them all and in the darkness bind them, how he's like, that's 2 lines of a verse long known in elven lore, and then they goes on to that, which, essentially they say at the beginning of the movie, like when Galadriel's talking through the rings and everything, is they sort of give this poem, sort of, and it's like, I just kind of thought that the words on the ring were just like specific words on that ring, when in fact it's like, no, it's part of this tale, like it's yeah, but
yeah, it's its own rhyme, poem that's known to all the free folk because of the poor affiliation with Sauron, because he's basically the current iteration of Satan. Since Morgoth no longer lives in Middle Earth, he's kind of the de facto Satan. Yeah, and then one thing I was going to point out too that I really appreciate when he's going through the background of the ring and the background of Gollum is how he mentions the fact that Gollum eats babies.
Did I miss that?
It's right after they're talking about the woodsman keeping track of uh, I don't have the book on hand right now, but yeah, it's shortly after he starts discussing Ghost in the Mirkwood.
Oh, oh, wait a minute. Maybe how did I miss this? The baby. Hold on.
It doesn't say babies in particular, but it does mention that they are more protective of the cradles.
Oh, how did I miss that? I gotta find this now. Let's see. Okay, so is it after they talk about his origin story about him and him murdering his friend? Is it after that?
I do believe it's after the part with Beagle.
Let's see. It's Gandalf's talking about. Oh wait, okay, wait. The wood elves tracked him first, an easy task for them, for his trail was still fresh then. The woodman said that there was some new terror abroad, a ghost that drank blood. It climbed trees to find nests. It crept into holes to find the young. It slipped through windows to find cradles. Interesting. Yep. I completely glazed over that when I read it. Like, I definitely just read that and just kept going. Interesting. Oh, that's creepy. Like, oh, that's very creepy. I did also find, speaking of the Gollum part and like him, Gandalf finding out more about Gollum's like backstory and where he's been, I did find it interesting how Gandalf finds him first and, you know, questions him and stuff like that. And yet in the movie, Gandalf only talks about excuse me. Gandalf only talks about when he finds him like at Isengard, right? Is he at Isengard or is he in Mordor? In Mordor.
Oh no, they find him in Mordor.
Yeah. And he's like being tortured there, and that's where he utters the whole like Shire, you know, and everything. And it's like, well, in the movie, at least, you know, unless there's some kind of super subtle reference or something, like, you know, they don't really mention that Gandalf actually finds him first and questions him first. Which I just found interesting. And then as we know, the whole eagle thing, it's like that's mentioned, that's like physically formed in The Return of the King, which I actually really appreciate that they go into that, like you said, Mork, like they eventually fit it in. I like that they put it in the movie at all because it kind of humanizes Gollum a little bit, but also he's a tough character because you're like, part of you is like, man, I really feel for this character. Like he, like the like we've been saying a couple times in this discussion, like the ring is its own entity. The ring has, air quote, its own mind. So it made its way to Gollum and corrupted him. So you're like, man, like poor Smeagol, like he got corrupted by the ring. But then you're also like, man, screw this guy. Like he is so evil. Like he is terrible, you know. And so he's got, it's very much a like a moral conundrum of like, well, do we pity this character or do we, which I think Frodo kind of has that dilemma as well of like, you know, oh, like I hate the fact that Bilbo spared him. And it's like, no, but he showed him, or like he's like, what was it, like didn't Frodo say like pitying him would have been to kill him, whereas, or something to that effect, whereas Gandalf,
well, he just said, you know,
that's later on. It's brought up in the same conversation that they use in Moria, but that because they use the conversation in Moria from this chapter in the book, or when they're using it for downtime in Moria,
Yeah.
that's where it comes up again. Because he
Mm.
says pity would or stayed Frodo's or Bilbo's hand. But here he doesn't talk about that, but he does say that like, who are you to choose death? Like,
But I thought Gandalf did say that.
Yeah, pity. It was pity
might-
and mercy.
might
It's
have.
pity that stayed his hand, pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo, because he be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end because he began his ownership of the ring so with pity.
Yeah.
And then it does many live that deserve death and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them?
Yeah.
Yeah, so both of those are here.
Yeah, which is an interesting
Okay, yeah.
way to think of that as well, because you're like, okay, the idea of many that are alive deserve death, but then the flip side of that of like many that die deserve life, and then the gauntlet thrown down of can you give that to them? It's like, well, you can't bring people back from the dead, so how are you going to commit those to death? It was just like, it's like, huh. He's
Well,
asked.
it's also,
Go ahead.
as Mark pointed out there, it's funny because Gollum began his ownership of the ring with murder and
Mm.
became an absolute wretch and monstrosity. And Bilbo gained the ring simply through not murdering Gollum and beating him in a game.
Yeah.
And so when he was able to freely give up the ring and just walk off, his life is still his life. He's not entirely consumed by it the same way that Gollum.
Huh. I hadn't thought of it that way. That is very interesting. Yeah, because it says here, like, Gollum. Gandalf says, I think it is a sad story, said the wizard, and it might have happened to others, even to some hobbits that I have known. And then, like, let's see. Yeah, it's just, again, it's that hard kind of moral dilemma of like, do we pity this character and say like, man, like he has fallen on hard times, we feel sorry for him, but then also you think of what he's done and you're just like, oh boy, how do I forgive, maybe isn't the right word, but how do I forgive this character for what he's done, considering it was kind of like thrust upon him in a way, like the ring corrupted him, but it's like back and forth, very like internal struggle. Let's see. I also liked that Gandalf references the ring wraiths in this part. About how, I think it's in here. Yeah, the 9 he gave to mortal men, proud and great, and so ensnared them. Long ago they fell under the dominion of the One, and they became ring wraiths, shadows under his great shadow, his most terrible servants. Long ago, it is many a year since the 9 walked abroad. Abroad is where? Like, meaning in Middle Earth, or?
Yeah, just along the lands of men.
Oh, okay. Where would they be otherwise?
Mordor most likely, or leading the various kingdoms that are under Sauron's spell.
But is that still of Middle Earth?
Yeah, but they're not wandering abroad. They're not gathered together.
Oh, I guess I'm thinking of what we think of abroad, which would be like over the Great Pond to the UK or Europe. But that makes sense.
Well, Middle Earth is it's the realm of Arda. It's a large, several continents. It's not just what we think of in the West.
Okay.
Because the West with the kingdoms of Arnor and the Shire and Rohan and Gondor, those are all. That's the West. Then those are the free people of Middle Earth.
Oh, interesting. So the map
Yeah.
that we think of is actually not the entire map.
No, that's just a small section of it.
Oh,
Oh, it
interesting.
gets bigger, buddy.
Excellent.
Yeah, you have this the Southrons are where the Heradrians come
The
from.
Haradrim.
And then you have, of course, out
Yeah.
east, which is where the Blue Wizards took off to, and then never to return.
Ooh. Is this all Silmarillion knowledge, or where is this all in?
Some of it's also the Unfinished Tales.
Ooh, this is just getting me more and more excited.
One thing I think I caught this time, I'm like, oh, and he names drops Aragorn in
Yes!
this chapter.
Yes.
You know, and whereas before he's in Bree and he's like, oh, he's Strider, and you know, I think they do make it in the books. You'll see it make it a little bit clearer who he is, kind of right up front.
Yeah.
Doesn't have quite the same mystery. It is a great introduction to him in the movie, though.
Oh, yeah, that is like one of the most iconic scenes ever. You just see him in a corner with his cloak up and his pipe, and you just get the little glow from his oh. Yes.
Oh, and as you were talking passage of time earlier as well, so in the movie, this all happens in the middle of the night after Frodo gets home from the Green Dragon.
Yeah.
And then Gandalf just approaches him, and that's why like Sam makes it sound, or he's like, no, I was just trimming the grass, and it's like, no, you weren't. Like, it's a little late for that. And then
That's a good point.
But in the book, he does meet with him at night, and then they talk all night, and in the morning they decide to continue speaking because
right.
much of what needs to be said should not be said in the dark, and it should be said in the light of day.
Right.
And that's why Sam's trimming the yard, and then they stop hearing him with his clippers.
Because it's the next day. I did pick up on that about the whole like we shouldn't talk in the night and stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of Gandalf and Snark, I do love when he talks about, you know, Frodo's like, why don't you destroy the ring? And he's like, would you? How would you do that? Have you even tried?
Yeah. Well, even before that, he's like,
Like, look, we just throw this in your fire. It didn't melt.
yeah, it didn't even get hot. Yeah, and then for like before that, a couple mini paragraphs, he was like, why did you let me keep it? Why didn't you make me throw it away or destroy it? And he's like, let you make you like wake up. Like, I haven't done anything. Like, I presented it to you, you kept it. You know. Yeah, I agree. Like that, you know, it's like I feel like it's the like Edna mode where it's like, pull yourself together. Like, you know, it's just like, you know, just dude. And it's, you know, it's interesting as well because he mentions, doesn't he also mention in here? Yeah, he's like, there's only one way to find the cracks of doom in the depths of, I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation, or Rodrune, the Fire Mountain, and cast the ring in there. If you really like, did I butcher that pronunciation? I probably butchered that.
I'd have to actually see how it's spelled out to pronounce it properly.
Orodruin. Orodruin. But it's the Fire Mountain.
Oroduin?
Maybe?
Yeah, I believe that would be Oroduin.
Sounds much better than what I said. So we'll go with that. But similarly to the whole like Aragorn getting introduced early, I feel like this is almost something similar, is that like in the movie we don't get the like description of how, well, actually no, do we in the movie? But we don't get the real like drawn out description of how to destroy the ring like for Frodo, because yes, we get it with whole Isildur and blah blah blah, but like,
Oh, and one does not simply
Well,
walk.
you
to
get it
Mordor.
with yeah, you get it at the Council of Elrond.
Right.
It's where he's like, it must be thrown into the fires of Mount Doom where it was forged. But
right.
here, Gandalf just like, look, no, look, this has got to go into that fire. That's the only way to destroy this.
Right, and that's kind of what I was getting to, is that it's like for Frodo in the movie, it's mentioned at the Council of Elrond, but here it's like, boom, right out of the gate, like, buddy, it's got to go into the fires of Mount Doom, you know? And so it's like very early on, we as the reader understand, like, oh man, we've got, like, even if you read this way back when it first came out, like as a book, you know, and you have no idea the ending, it's like, okay, well, we got to get from way over here in the Shire to way down here in Mordor. Well, we got to get from point A to point B somehow. And then I did like Frodo's response where he's like, I do really wish to destroy it, or, well, to have it destroyed. I'm not made for perilous quest. I wish I had ever seen the ring. Why did it come to me? Why was I chosen? And it's just like, that's, I feel like his, you know, his inner struggle as well between being a Baggins and a Took, right? Because technically he is one, is the same kind of conundrum that Bilbo had of like the very distinguished, you know, Baggins, but then his like more Tookish side came out. And same kind of thing. He's like, I'm not made for perilous journeys. It's like, that's the Baggins coming out.
They make one late for supper.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how terrible is that? Let's see. It's like, let's see. You know, it's like, okay, so Frodo decides he needs to leave the Shire. Oh, I did like this line because this is almost like a direct quote into the movie, is the hobbits really are amazing creatures. As I have said before, you can learn all that there is to know about their ways in a month, and yet after 100 years, they can still surprise you at a pinch. Because I think that is in the Fellowship, right? They don't throw that in somewhere later. That's in this scene in the movie.
Right when they're leaving, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Because he quickly turns around to be like, all right, let's go. In the movie, he doesn't have the refusal of the adventurers as much.
But yeah, it's kind of more like, you know, where can we hide it? Where can we? And then he's like, I'm sorry, I found him. He was tortured. He's like, Shire Baggins, and they'll come here, you know. And he was like, you know. And then also here as well, that's kind of something different, very minor detail, but like Gandalf tells him what name to go by, whereas when he's in the Prancing Pony, he's like, Underhill. The name's Underhill, you know. And it's like he kind of pulled it out of nowhere, whereas Gandalf's like, no, this is what you're gonna go by. Let's see. Yep, and then he says like, he's like, I don't think you need to go alone. Who do you want to go with? And that's when he notices the quiet. I did like how in the movie, it's not just like his hand that he reaches to get Sam, but he like first whacks him in the head with his staff and then grabs him. Or not like whacks him, but he like aggressively pokes him. And let's see. I was just trimming the grass border under the window. How long have you been eavesdropping? I liked
We're dropping the leaves.
Yeah, I love that in the movie because I'm like, I think in the panic of the moment, if Gandalf were to be staring me down like that, I think I would be saying the same thing. I'd be like, I wasn't dropping no eaves or eaves, sir. It's just like, oh boy. Oh, and like, but then Sam's response in the book though is he's like, eavesdropping, sir? I don't follow you. Begging your pardon. There aren't no eaves at Bag End, and that's a fact. Oh, and then the line of like, don't let him turn me into anything unnatural. And I think that what's his name delivered that line really beautifully with the little pause in the middle there, because he's like legitimately concerned that Gandalf's gonna turn him into something unnatural. Yeah, and then yeah, Sam almost backs himself into a corner of like volunteering himself to go on this trip because he's like, oh, I'd love to see the elves, you know, kind of thing. It's like, well, you're going on this adventure.
The joys of being voluntold.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's also kind of innocent of Sam's like excitement. Because he's just like, you know, he says, "Me, sir?" cried Sam, springing up like a dog invited for a WALK. I can't say it too loudly because my dog is laying down right behind me. And he was like, "Me go and see elves and all? Hooray!" he shouted, and then burst into tears. And it's like, do you know what you just signed up for? I don't know if you fully grasp the concept in which you just signed up for something. But yeah. We're at like 49, 50-ish minutes here. But I think that unless there's any final notes from anybody, I think that covers a lot of the key points of this. I know I talked for a lot of it, but like I said, I really enjoyed this chapter. I liked seeing the original reference material for this part. I also liked the more in-depth detail they went into overall with everything. And like you said, Mark, how they tie in things into other parts of the movie to make sure that those key like backstory lore details are covered, even if they're not covered in the exact moment in which Tolkien wrote them. But like, I thought it was really cool that, you know, there was all that depth and that it's like, oh, there actually was in the book, there was like reference to this and it wasn't something that like came out later, but it's like, no, it was in the original text that Tolkien wrote these details to paint you that full picture of who you're dealing with, what you're dealing with, etc. I loved that.
Well, also, in the sense of a film, you can reveal that stuff later because you're just getting the action flowing. Where this is all they call that exposition early on, so that Frodo also knows what the adventure is before he signs up to it, and then he joins. Because in a book, you want to get the exposition out as fast as possible, so that the reader is only following the plot from then on out, rather than it just being like, oh, well, this is what's happening now, and then having somebody explain to you every time you get to a new place.
Right. And that's definitely the massive difference between like written media and visual media and like how we consume it. And it's like, okay, we've got this how many pages here? We've got, there's a lot of maps at the end of mine. We have this 398 page, my version at least, 398 page book that, yes, we have to cram if we do the extended edition, like 3 hours or whatever, 3 and change, or whatever. But it's like, okay, we've got to cram 350, let's round, almost 400, sorry, 350, math, nearly 400, there we go, I finally got the number out, nearly 400 pages into like 3 to 4 hours. So you have to cover about 100 pages in an hour. Okay, what are we covering? And so it's like, okay, what's pivotal to the story and what can we put in places that are slower? And
no, exactly. And that's also the difference between the Lord of the Rings as films versus The Hobbit as films.
Yep.
You have a lot more to work with The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit. They started just throwing stuff in rather than doing The Hobbit.
Yeah, which is why the stream title for our last book club meeting for The Hobbit was what was it? It was did this really need 3 movies? So, well, all right, guys. If there's no further comments about this chapter, I keep wanting to say like these chapters because I'm so used to from The Hobbit we read a couple chapters at a time. I think when I looked ahead at, because I've kind of been using the audiobook reading as like a guesstimation as to how long some of these like the readings and potential discussions are taking, because it looks like about 20 sub 30 pages we can cover in about an hour. And it looks like, I think chapter 3 I think is one of the last really long ones, at least based on the recording. Maybe it was chapter 4, but I think this is another week of doing 1 chapter, I think. So another, just chapter 3, which I also find interesting that chapter 3 is called 3 is Company. Interesting. We'll probably do just chapter 3 for next week so that we can make sure we cover it in roughly an hour. And because I think that's a good amount of time. And yeah. Sorry for talking for most of it, but I really liked this chapter.
Oh, sorry,
I
I
think this
couldn't do
next
more.
chapter-
I was still at work.
Oh, you're good, Tim. You're good. I love having you guys who are very much Tolkien experts in here, because I love hearing about all the nuancy little things that I didn't pick up on because it's my first time reading. And hearing some of the like more backstory stuff that comes in the I always want to call it like the unfinished is it the unfinished tales?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
like,
the Unfinished Tales were they were a collection of stories that Tolkien was working on and
right.
passed before they could be finished.
Yeah.
But they're I think they've been collected a few times, but I can't remember offhand.
Yeah, I have at least 1 copy of that. I know I have 2 copies. Well, I might have 3 copies now of the Silmarillion. I know I have at least 2, but I think I definitely have the tales, and I have some other stuff too. But let's get through the trilogy first, guys. Okay. Like, as always, greatly appreciate you guys for your discussion and even just, listening in and being a part of it, and everything. I really appreciate it. So I'll make an announcement in the chat that we'll read chapter 3 for next week. And I know that in a couple weeks we've got a Monday meeting. I think it's in 2 weeks. So we'll discuss if we will have a meeting in 2 weeks or if we need to bump the date to make sure not to conflict with Tag's meeting, but we'll discuss when we get there. So next week we'll discuss chapter 3, and I will see you guys around in the Discord.
All right.
Have a great evening, everybody.
Cool. You guys too.
Bye, everybody.
Later.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Cheers.
All right, chat. I keep wanting to say chat like I'm talking to a live stream, which I'm not. Thank you guys for watching to the end. If you did make it this far, congratulations. You made it through another book club meeting. Next week, like I said, we will be reading chapter 3 of the Fellowship of the Ring, which is called 3 is Company. So if you are reading along with us at home, that is what you're going to be reading. And yeah, this has been an amazing discussion as always. And I just love the fact that I have friends who are willing to do a book club with me. I am tickled pink by that fact. And I'm very touched that people are willing to do a book club with me. So if you found my channel via the book club, I do a lot of other things. I stream. I'm a variety streamer. I LARP. The book club is with my LARP friends, and some gaming friends. So I have little avenues of all sorts of different interests. So if this is how you found me, welcome in. There's a lot to be found here. And I hope you stick around. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. and follow along for more. And this will be posted tomorrow morning, and it'll already be live once you guys are watching this. And I guess I will see you guys in stream this week or in another video. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening and a great rest of your week. Bye. As my dog's making a bunch of noise in the background. Great way to end the video. All right. Bye, everybody.